Facepalm America. I'm Beowulf Rockland. Facepalmamerica.com is where you can go for more information about the show, to listen to past episodes, to connect with us on social media. And I think at the end of today's show, maybe I'll do it a little later in the week, we will have a couple of messages that you have sent us via text and via Facebook. But I do want you to know that 202-656-6271 is the number that you can either call us or message us on. And prior to joining you right now, I was just having a conversation about messaging with John Rothman, because it is Monday, and it is time to talk with John Rothman of Around the Political World with John Rothman, a podcast that you should listen to on any podcast platform that you choose, because it is there. John, welcome to Facepalm America. Thank you so much for being here today.
Always a pleasure. I hope you're looking forward to a wonderful Thanksgiving with your family. I
am. It's going to be very quiet. It's going to be very, I anticipate that it will be calm. All the turkey is in the freezer. It is ready to go. My mother-in-law will be coming over, and that will be about it. We won't be doing any out-of-town traveling, thank goodness, and we will stay pretty close. And
I do know that today you want to talk turkey.
I do.
And I will certainly keep you abreast of every situation as we get a leg up.
Okay, as long as you're not too left-wing about it, John.
That was a real thigh slapper. I know, by the skin of my teeth. Go ahead.
I was gonna save it until the end, but let's start out on a positive note, because according to a story that I read in thehill.com, 6 in 10 are hoping to avoid politics at Thanksgiving. I understand the desire to keep things calm and peaceful, and in many families there are divided political interests. I cannot imagine that taking place at the Rothman family table. I would assume that regardless of the political proclivities, you would let free-ranging conversation flow.
The more vigorous the discussion, the better I like it. And I should point out, my father always said there were two subjects you should never talk about, politics and religion, the only two subjects that ever interested me. So we just have a lot of fun with it.
No,
and
that's
by the
good.
way, I like somebody who disagrees with me. It's a lot more fun when you have somebody who disagrees with you, when you have somebody saying, oh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it is. And I have found over the course of the years, perhaps because of the different professions that I've gotten into, that I can't help but have conversations with people with whom I disagree. It's a consequence of being someone who is progressive and going into the world of talk radio. And so I've just been unable to avoid it over the course of the years. And it's been very interesting, but I think it's worthwhile because you form bonds beyond specific political issues, and you get to actually understand people and where they are coming from. And I think that is an important thing, and something that we seem to lose a lot in a more bifurcated and a more polarized political era in the United States.
Well, we're in what is really the oldest profession in the world, and that is communication.
I suppose
that to me is wonderful.
I suppose so. If you want to call communication the world's oldest profession, there were probably many who in spirit would agree with you, John.
Another dinner table conversation. All right.
Indeed. So, interestingly, and you and I have talked about this a couple of times, because there has been an ongoing effort in a number of different states, which is still ongoing, but in Colorado specifically, the effort to get Donald Trump off the ballot under the auspices that the 14th Amendment to the Constitution does not allow those who have engaged in insurrection to hold high public office. And it's interesting, a ruling came down just this weekend, and the judge ruled that, yes, indeed, the Donald Trump engaged in insurrection by her lights, but that because of a technicality in the phrasing, which I'm a little unclear on, that he should not be excluded from the ballot. And I think that's fascinating. My recollection of your viewpoint on this was that Donald Trump should not be taken off the ballot, that he should be allowed to run and be removed by a vote of the people. So what are your thoughts on this particular ruling?
Well, for Donald Trump, it was a victory in a sense, because now, if this case is appealed, it'll go all the way to the Supreme Court. And I don't think the court will disqualify him from the ballot. Remember, this is the primary ballot, not the general election ballot.
Right.
But more than that, I think the fact that the judge wrote a lengthy explanation of why Donald Trump participated in insurrection is critical. And that, to me, is the essence of it. I should address immediately the question of a gag order. I want Donald Trump to be able to speak freely, but I don't think that means that he should be able to attack a judge or a prosecutor or a clerk in a court.
Right.
Let him talk issues and not personalities. And I think that's the key. And we'll see how this case, which is taking place even as we speak, on the question of lifting the gag order. But I believe that there are limits on free speech. You cannot shout fire in a crowded courtroom.
Yes.
Just as I believe if you are in a legal case, you should not be able to attack the judge, the jury, or the staff. If once the verdict comes down, you want to appeal it, that's a whole different matter. But the kind of public display of rhetoric that Donald Trump is demonstrating shows a cavalier, irresponsible approach to law and justice. Remember, the oath of office of the President of the United States is 35 words. I do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. So help me God is not in the oath, but is added symbolically. Those 35 words are important, and Donald Trump has betrayed the very essence of his oath of office. He is not upholding the Constitution.
Yeah.
By the way, you might ask me, how do I have that committed to memory? Because as a kid, I imagined one day I would be able to take the oath of office.
It's interesting. I was reading, and we'll get to the subject in a little more broadly. But I had been thinking specifically about the oath of office because, and I think I mentioned it to you before, that I had been rereading The Death of a President by William Manchester.
William Manchester. I have it here on the shelf.
And
he inscribed it for me.
Great
guy.
That's fantastic. That's wonderful. I can't help but ask, under what circumstances did you meet William Manchester? Because I've met
an interview.
Fantastic.
An interview.
Really?
It's always an interview when you're in the business of being a talk show host.
Man, I wish
not being live on the radio now, I don't have those live interviews, and so I don't have the opportunity to have a signed or inscribed copy of a book unless I'm very fortunate.
Well, let me just say to you that I say as a fan of yours and on behalf of many, many fans that if you get to the point and have the ability, and there are certainly many willing to assist you in this regard, that if you get back to the ability to do interviews, the breadth and depth of your historical and political knowledge really brings an excellent and wonderful flavor to every interview that you did. And I regret not having heard the interview with William Manchester because I've read so many of his books. But I would love to hear many more because you bring just a wonderful sense of history, and we would love to hear more of that again on your podcast.
I appreciate it. You mentioned The Death of a President. Let me remind everybody, November 22nd will take place this week, that I, every November 22nd, reread The Death of a President, and also the corollary book, which was called Controversy, which I also have here on the shelf, in which he explains the dispute he had with the Kennedy family as the Death of a President was to be released. So, there are a lot of elements. There was even a 1-hour interview. I have the transcript of it. A 1-hour interview on Meet the Press in which he explained all the dimensions, and one could do hours of discussion about the book, the interview, everything.
Yeah. And getting back to the original point that we were talking about in the context of the oath, it's really a fascinating historical discussion because he goes into some depth about the oath once JFK was assassinated and the necessity or non-necessity of LBJ needing to take the oath, how immediate that was, and what the specific wording needed to be, and LBJ's search for the specific wording of the oath that he needed to take. Now, from my perspective, from having read,
by the way, that came to him from Bobby Kennedy.
It did.
The Justice Department said it, and then when Judge Hughes administered the office,
Right.
the oath of office, interestingly enough, administered by a judge, not by the Chief Justice.
Yeah.
And you will recall that at one point, the Chief Justice of the United States, they said, well, he has to be the one to do it. And it isn't so. Any federal judge can give the opportunity for the oath of office.
It was really interesting. He didn't really need to call Bobby Kennedy. It really seemed as if that part of it were just a formality. And indeed, if a president passes away while in office, that strictly speaking, you don't really need to retake the oath, as the vice president is required to take the same oath as the president of the United States.
It's a different oath, actually. The vice president takes a different oath, but the same oath that's administered to senators. But let me be clear about this. Once a president is out of office or dies or whatever the case may be, you automatically become president of the United States with or without the oath.
Yeah.
And I think that's very important.
Yeah, and it was interesting to me that actually redoing the oath when a vice president assumed office, until I reread Manchester's work carefully, was not something that had been established until several decades of presidents had already served. It was not
Harry Truman was administered the oath by the then Chief Justice of the United States. You will recall that Calvin Coolidge received notification in Vermont, and his father was a justice of the peace, and he administered the oath of office to him on that fateful day in August of 1923. So, but you can go back in history all the way through to document all of this. And in fact, there are books that have been written about it, many of which I have in my library. Anyway.
No, and it really is, it's a fascinating topic to me. And I get the sense, drawing it to a different level, that the reason LBJ did it was not so much because he really thought he had to, but because for political purposes, in order to establish himself and get the assent or imprimatur of the Kennedy family, that he felt the need to reach out to Robert Kennedy, who was the most powerful, in the wake of JFK's death, the most powerful member of the administration and essentially the head of the Kennedy family.
And if you remember the iconic photograph taken on Air Force One, was with Jackie Kennedy in her blood-stained pink suit, standing next to Lyndon Johnson.
Yeah,
it was an important symbolic note for those of us who were alive then, and I have vivid memories of that day, where I was, what I was doing. It was part of the symbolism that makes America strong. And may I say to you, that applies in any historic circumstance. My podcast this morning has to do with witness. Last night I gave a talk, but before I spoke, a young woman who was at the tragic rave concert in Israel, where so many died, she survived. And she spoke with such eloquence last night to a group of 20, 30-year-olds that gathered, and about 100 of them, I was asked to speak after her. Very tough thing to do. But we are all witnesses, and the important thing is to remember and to have that stuck in our minds and in our hearts, no matter what the issue is. On Thanksgiving, what do most of us do? We think of memories of where we were, the Thanksgivings we enjoyed, the food we enjoyed. Somebody asked me, what was your favorite Thanksgiving? We went to my grandmother's. My grandmother has been dead for more than half a century, but my memory of being there, that was the first time, by the way, I had ever seen a turkey molded in ice cream. It was, one of the things that your memory, now I guess you could order them first. So for my grandmother, she actually had them made in her own kitchen.
I have never heard of such a thing. That is amazing.
It was really something. So we all have those kinds of memories, and it is the memory of where you were when John F. Kennedy was killed, or where you were when you heard what happened on October the 7th in Israel.